So the 3700, gee, god dang. Your boy's trying to record a video here, all right? I know that you guys are honking out there. It's probably some shit in the street. Hey guys, it is Cam from Craft & Tailored. In this episode of What Is On My Wrist, we are talking about a fan favorite. It's the Patek Philippe Nautilus. This is a reference 3800J. So J represents yellow gold. This is an exceptional example, and I'm really excited to talk about it with you here on our channel. Okay, we're just rolling with it.
I thought you were gonna go Swedish Chef for a second.
I'm talking about. Okay, fuck. All right, so we've talked a lot about the Nautilus on our channel before. We've reviewed the steel 3700, AKA the Jumbo. We've reviewed 3700Js, AKA the yellow gold Jumbo. But I would say that the Nautilus as a whole has been increasing in popularity over the past couple years, and as a result of the Jumbo and the Patek Nautilus kind of increasing in popularity, a lot of the other models that were produced by Patek have also increased in popularity. So one kind of iconic and more classic version of that would be the 3800 series of Patek Philippe's in the Nautilus range, obviously. There's that saying like, you know, all tides, rising tides, I don't know. You know, I'm not good with this shit. Like rising tides bring up all ships. And there's been a Patek Philippe, you know, rising tide over the past few years. So we've talked about the Nautilus before on the channel, and we've really just talked about the Jumbo series of watches. Well, the Jumbos are great, but for a lot of guys and gals and people, you know, they've become kind of unaccessible just from a price point perspective. Additionally, you know, the Nautilus in the 3700 range, whether it be steel, two-tone, or gold, there weren't a lot of them produced, so the accessibility at any given moment is, you know, pretty small. So as a result of that, what has happened is the 3800s and the other auxiliary Nautilus models have also received an increase in popularity due to kind of the hype around the, you know, kind of cornerstone Nautilus models, one in which being in the vintage range, the 3700. I've had a lot of caffeine. Let's have some more. Let's just. So, quick recap, Gérald Genta designed the Nautilus in the 1970s, and it's an icon. And although the Nautilus reference 3700, AKA the Jumbo, with its 42mm diameter case, was the initial Gérald Genta design offered by Patek, it, you know, kind of appeared that the market at the time wasn't ready for a watch that was that large. So similar to like the 5402, same thing with the 3700, you know, the Royal Oak in the 4100 series was a little bit smaller. Same thing with the 3800s. It's a smaller watch, but yet it is very much Nautilus, just as the Royal Oak was the Royal Oak with the 4100 series of watches. And you know, they were kind of trying to take that watch design and pare it down so that it met kind of the sizing trends of that era. In 1981, while the 3700 was still in production, Patek decided to introduce a slightly smaller version of the Nautilus to gain traction, and this basically was introduced as the 3800. So the 3800 series of watches was produced in similar fashion to, let's say, the 3700 series range of watches in both yellow gold, steel, and then in two-tone offerings. In similar fashion to, you know, total production number of watches, obviously steel, you know, far surpasses the yellow gold in the two-tone options. So to have a Nautilus in yellow gold is pretty special, and the 3800J series of watches has definitely increased in popularity because, one, I think that they wear nice on the wrist. It's hard for some people to wear the 42mm jumbo sized 3700 Nautiluses, and also I think just an accessibility thing. Personally, for me, actually wears better on my wrist. I don't have super hulky wrists, so the case size on a 3700 and in reality a 5402 is kind of too long for my wrist, whereas 4100 series of Royal Oaks and the 3800 series kind of just fits my wrist nicely. I mean, if you look at it on wrist, the bracelet isn't fully sized properly for my wrist, but if you look at it, it doesn't wear like a small watch at all. The watch is still very slim. And on top of that, the bezel is somewhat thin, so the dial presents kind of larger than it really is, if that makes sense. So I'm a big fan of the 3800 series, and I think people are realizing that. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the major differences between the 3800s and the 3700s, outside of just kind of the key elements of its size. The 3800 is 37.5 millimeters in diameter, so it's not a small watch, but compared to 42, it's definitely smaller. One other thing too is the thickness of the bracelet. The bracelet tapers down quite a bit more, and then the dial is also a little bit different. The watch, I believe, is actually a tad bit thicker in terms of its overall thickness and height. And one other thing too that you'll notice is that the 3800 series, as opposed to the 3700 series, has a sweep seconds hand, which I actually kind of like. I like seeing that sweep seconds hand. Some might argue and say, oh, you know, Genta's design was like supposed to be ultra thin, ultra minimalist, et cetera, but I don't really think it detracts from the design all too much. We have the two markers located at the 12 o'clock position, and then the stick markers that go all the way around. And then of course we have that date at the 3 o'clock position. In any case, we're splitting hairs, but very similar in design. So one thing to note that is kind of interesting that most people don't realize is that the Patek Nautilus 3700 actually leveraged a Jaeger-LeCoultre Cal 28-255C movement, which was like the world's thinnest movement. And that was leveraged by a few other brands. We won't get into the nitty-gritty about the movement, but the Ref 3800 received its own in-house movement under the Patek Cal 3035SC. And what I think is interesting about that is that, you know, the 3800, although it wasn't the original design, it was a Nautilus that received its own in-house movement, as opposed to the 3700, which leveraged the Jaeger-LeCoultre movement. So kind of an interesting little fun fact that this watch actually has an in-house movement, whereas the original interpretation of the Nautilus under the 3700 series actually leveraged a JLC movement. Not many people know that, but you do now. All right, so let's do a quick recap on the tech specs. The watch is 37.5 millimeters in diameter. We've got this integrated bracelet similar to, you know, what you would see in like a 3700 or really most Nautiluses. Not every Nautilus came on, you know, an integrated bracelet. Some of them came on like different straps and stuff like that. Flip-lock little clasp. Everything is, of course, gold on this specific example. And we've got a Patek Philippe in-house caliber 3035SC movement, which is kind of the heartbeat of this bad boy. So those are kind of the tech specs at a glance. Non-locking crown, by the way, just kind of the normal press fit Nautilus type of crown. This specific example is in really nice overall condition. It's probably been polished at least once, but we do see a lot of the factory finishing. A lot of the case geometry is still there. The watch is still thick. The bracelet is real nice and thick, although it is on the thinner side. They're not bulky bracelets to begin with. It wears very sleek and slimline. So this example is available for sale at the time of recording, although I'm pretty sure it's not gonna last long. The 3800 series of watches, whether they be in steel, two-tone, and or yellow gold like this, they sell pretty quickly. I'll provide a link in the description below so that you guys can check this out and also explore the 3700 series of watches. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not doing so already, follow us on Instagram at @CraftedTailored. And if you've got watch questions, totally here and happy to help. Drop us a line at info@craftedtailored.com. I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for tuning in. How's Daddy looking in this shirt today, Pete? How's Daddy looking?
Cameron looks good.
You know what I'm saying? Been eating a lot of burgers. Got my muscle shirt on.